What if one of the biggest reasons Indian students go to the US suddenly vanished in thin air? Don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about Ivy League dreams or Silicon Valley paychecks. I'm talking about a tiny 3-letter acronym that punches way above its weight. OPT. Optional Practical Training, OPT, has been that golden bridge. Study in the US, work for up to 3 years if you're a STEM graduate, gain experience, and if you're lucky, hop over to an H-1B visa. And Indians took that bridge more than anyone else. In fact, according to the Open Doors report, they cornered over 40% of all OPT approvals last year. But now, that bridge is at risk of being burnt. On 25th March this year, Representative Paul A. Gosar introduced the Fairness for Highly Skilled Americans Act of 2025, aiming to eliminate the OPT program unless expressly authorized by Congress. His reason? That it's undercutting American jobs. Ironically, OPT's golden years came during the first Trump regime. Barring the pandemic slump, the number of Indians availing OPT crossed 80,000 for the first time under his presidency. But this time around, the mood has shifted completely. Trump is pandering to his core voter base and targeting visa norms that were once quietly encouraged. So, what does this mean for Indian students? Are we looking at a future where the US becomes a degree-only destination? Or worse, not a destination at all? Stay tuned for answers to all this and more. If you're an Indian student in the US or planning to go, this one's for your group chat, your parents' group chat, your college counselor, and maybe even your banker too. It's Thursday, the 17th of April. I'm your host, Nikhil Ghai, and you're listening to The Morning Brief. To understand what's at stake, I dialed Nikhil Jain, founder of ForeignAdmits, who works closely with students chasing global education dreams. And for many of them, OPT isn't a bonus, it's a necessity. He walks us through how OPT functions as a return on investment and why repealing it would hit not just students, but also American universities. Nikhil, if I were to ask you who stands to be most affected if OPT is eliminated, what would you say? Are there certain student cohorts that are more vulnerable than others? Is it more of a concern for masters and PhD students, or are even undergrad students getting anxious?
Oh, that's a great question. I'll start it with certain facts about Open Door report. If we see the Open Doors report, around 330,000 students are studying in the US, and approximately around 90 to 100,000 students are in the OPT phase. And the major hit is taken by the STEM students. And most of the Indian students actually go for maths or computer science related courses to the US. So we have seen a lot of masters and postgraduate students who are going for PhD are to be more scared about it. The people who are more or less going from India, for them, education is a bare need to come out of their adverse conditions and to thrive in a better employment environment. For them, if they're losing, OPT, then which means basically the plan to work for 3 years and recoup the investment that they have made, which is very, very high, is far more affected. Undergrad students, the new incoming undergrad students, yes, they are rethinking on their plans for the US, but the current undergrad students still have some scope of transfers to maybe UK, to maybe other countries, because the other international destinations are also coming up in terms of helping these international students who may look to transfer. This may create a little bit of chaos in the entire industry, given that the clarity is still yet to come. But again, scraping OPT may not be a long-term strategy for US, given that international students had been consistently contributing towards the economic and even the growth of the nation for US in that sense.
You talked about how student conversations have shifted from case competitions and coding boot camps to legal webinars in the newspaper article. What does this tell us about the broader mood among international students?
I think international students are anyway a scared set of audience who goes to a remote destination away from the home in a foreign land where the rules are far more stricter and the chances of getting deported can be anytime, right? So
Yeah.
given that they have went for their academics, such kind of bill and the news around the market puts them into a scared position. So definitely everyone wants to be in the safe spot, right? So now the international students are, who can afford an attorney are taking help of the attorney. Else the universities are coming up to setting up more sessions with the attorneys or with the legal counselors, helping them to figure out what if OPT gets scraped. What are the next avenues? Yes, there is a sense of panic there, and H1B lottery focus has also fundamentally increased, and suddenly Canada has again become a slightly more lucrative for the earlier audience who were looking at more or less US in the first place. So more or less what we have seen is academic skills are great, but if the safety net of OPT is not there, then that kind of puts the students on the back foot, and they are all looking to safeguard their interest in the first place.
Nikhil, could you shed some light on what would scrapping OPT mean for Indian students who take on hefty education loans to study in the US? And also, can you provide our listeners a sense of the average loan amount students are working with? And what kind of financial stress would this change create?
So I think the first reaction would be like, oh boy, all the lenders may be scared given the NPAs may rise if at all OPT gets scraped. It will be tough blow for the entire ecosystem in itself because most of the lending policies with the lenders have always been US heavy or US focused, right?
Yeah.
And OPT is predominantly a 3 years window for most of the STEM students, which is able to repay their loans. More or less, students accelerate their payments in that 3 years. So without it, I think H1B is still a long shot, and we may see a very high volume of students with heavy loan and probably limited job options. And to give you an insight about what's the usual ticket size, barring the Ivy Leagues and the top UG courses, which usually demands upward of 100,000 to $200,000 loan at an interest rate of 10 to 12%. And then the mid markets, the major universities, where the students goes, is usually 25 to $30,000 or $40,000 a year. And this is alone the tuition fees, right? If you calculate the living expenses, which is also rising, it can go up to 50 or $40,000 a year. So $40,000 a year and a year, yeah. Because living expenses, if you look around in the US, in New York and California, would be upward of $1,000 a month easily, right? So if you look at it, $50,000 on an average, and maybe around 200,000 students graduating from the US with that kind of a loan, it would be a really hard time for the entire ecosystem. So losing OPT definitely means the loan repayment tenures will increase, the NPAs may also rise. And this is something very candid as an opinion that I'm putting forward. Right now, what students are doing is they are definitely exploring a lot of scholarships. They're trying to get sponsorship from the companies that they are applying for the jobs. They're also looking at part-time opportunities. There are also some of them are also migrating to other countries so that they have better chances to repay their loans. And definitely we'll see a large or population will come back to India in this sense.
You have your ear to the ground, Nikhil. You talk to people, university representatives, and the likes. How likely is it that the American higher education lobby will push back on this bill? We're hearing a lot about an enrollment cliff in US colleges. Can you explain to our listeners what that is and how it ties into this issue?
Definitely. As being an official member, of the body called NAFTA, and even learning about AIRC, these are some of the official bodies which are helping to build the ecosystem. So they are already pushing back hard if OPT faces elimination. And technically, international students contributed almost upward of $40 billion to the US economy somewhere in 2023 or 2024, and they have supported more than 300,000 jobs. let's understand, if OPT is not there, more students will not go to these universities. Ultimately, universities may face bankruptcy, which we are already seeing for some of the low rank universities, right? So losing OPT could make US less attractive and could put university and the US education system under a huge pressure. They need to build curriculums in that sense that it has to give H1B or better employment outcomes, which to our last 7-10 years of understanding, none of the universities have been able to master that skill at scale, right? The enrollment cliff that we see is definitely there for 2025 and 2026 to come. And it is very similar, I would say, the 2008 crisis, where a lot of students held their plan and the enrollment declines will see. So I predict somewhere around 10 to 15% easy decline would be there, by 2030. And that will shrink the market, unless the bill does not get passed, because already we are seeing the inflation and the job losses and the layoffs happening in the US and other countries, and tariffs are already playing role where a lot of country are increasing the cost of living, and other things would also get impacted gradually. So the lobbies are there, which will likely to argue about OPT and support both international students and US economy, framing to keep a win-win program. So there is an optimism still that their voice could be paired with student advocacy, because hey, US has been the land of opportunities, right? So they would want to keep it that way.
To understand the mood among current applicants and how consultants are recalibrating, my colleague and co host Prachi Verma spoke to Adarsh Khandelwal, co founder of Collegify. Adarsh explains how the bill is already creating unease among students eyeing fall 2025. Many are asking about fallback options like Canada, the UK, and even Germany, countries with clearer post study work pathways. But the US continues to have an enduring appeal for students. Listen in. Despite the challenges, do you see US being the topmost destination for Indian students?
See, the number of universities that exist in the US, the kind of quality from an education viewpoint, US becomes, the first point of discussion within any household if the topic begins with US. Over the years, we've seen the cost going up. There has been a lot of discussions around, the policies, the job markets has been volatile. There has been, questions in prospect of what is going to be the visa approval rates. So obviously, with the movement in the government and with so many policies and being introduced, there has been a question, right, among the family. So although US has been the first destination for the past many years, we see that, this is now gradually in a decline, or it is sort of going down the trajectory.
So, tell me one thing, Adarsh. In the whole scenario where, the new Trump administration has made a lot of noise about stricter visa rules, also about the OPT ban, even a little thing on social media where you're politically or socially making noise, that's coming under the radar. What is it looking like for an Indian student who's currently in the US?
So for thousands of Indian students each year, OPT isn't just a work permit, it's a bridge between, the education and the real world experience. And primarily, we've seen with the Trump administration, they are trying to scrutinize the entire, work and post-work experience for the international student, which will make the market and the entire education in the US less attractive. March 25th, they introduced a new bill, the Fairness for Higher Skilled American Act, which is still under discussion, where the entire disadvantage for that bill is that the students will primarily, they will have a limited numbers when it comes to the H1B traction. So, for someone who's looking at US as a destination, they have to be able to understand the nuances, what is the rule, and try to sort of, go accordingly.
So basically, your chances of migrating to an H1B visa are far lower, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So is that the next step for anyone going from India to study in the US to get an H1B visa? In that case, like as you're mentioning, the numbers are going to come down.
So newer destinations are emerging between currently Germany has become a new preference. So is New Zealand, right? Because their entire norms are supportive and their visa policies are also interesting. And US cost of education and cost of the entire 4-year undergraduate or 2-year graduate track is quite an expensive piece, right? So if there is no certainty in the industry absorption, or if the H1B sponsorship becomes a question, then students will gradually over a period of time look at opportunities where there is government funding, where there are policies which are more towards the international support for the community of the Indian students, and so on. So we'll have to watch all of 2025 to understand how things be for the upcoming students, right? To be able to take any call on how it will all turn out.
So, coming to the fact that, a large chunk from India goes to the US, and you mentioned that it has become an expensive affair. Can you tell me about what kind of fee does one pay if one is going for a simple STEM program? Also, the living cost.
So, see, typically an average tuition fees ranges between $50,000 to $80,000 a year in the US, right? Compared to that of Canada, which is around 35 to 40,000, and UK, which is close to 25 to 40,000 again. So US obviously becomes the most expensive piece. Now, US, the post-study work rights is 1 to 3 years, right? Based on whether you are a STEM OPT or a non-STEM OPT, And then the uncertainty is there when it comes to the H1B lottery. Comparatively, if you look at Canada, right, you do have a 3-year work permit for sure, right, which is a guarantee. And the possibility of immigration is high. If you are looking for a quality education, right, we know that the top 50, 60 universities out of the top 200 in the world come out of the US. So if education and the preference of the Stanfords and the Ivy is your ask, you are then in the direction of the US entirely.
Okay, okay. So basically the glamour, the whole attraction towards the US, and especially for the Indian students, is because of the number of great colleges. Is there something else as well?
So, the number of colleges that exist in the East Coast and the West Coast. We then are talking about the interdisciplinary learning, where you can get to do a mix and match major. We see very interesting majors, right, where there is a student who's doing music engineering. There are students who are mixing data science along with law, and the entire piece of liberal art and sciences, right, that entire education which is been highly spoken about all over the world. US are the sort of fundamental influencers of the liberal art and sciences, right? Also, US helps you build more skills, I think, in your undergraduate or your master's years, which is your formative years for you making an entry into a career. So, just to go by some numbers, we saw that, over 268,000 students were in the US, in 23-24. And there was a 35% increase, right? Making it the largest ever intake, surpassing China. So there is obviously a reason, right? There is a value in education. There is a value in the industry. You also see right now that all the disruption happening in the technology. We speak about, the generative AI. We speak about agentic AI. We speak about data analytics.
Yeah.
US universities are very intelligent in terms of making themselves and their entire curriculum adhere with the requirement of the industry, right? So that is the biggest reason why US education becomes a winner. There are colleges which have started an entire 4-year AI track.
They have been the pioneers in setting the education trends, or even the work trends for that matter. In the current scenario where there's this whole buzz about the OPT ban, and also further stricter visa rules coming in, what are the students who you're engaging with and the parents you're engaging with, what are their thoughts like?
So there are two set of clients, parents, families we engage with. One is who's going to currently graduate and is going to look for internship slash job in the market, right? Now, those families are obviously worried compared to all the news and all the trends and how things are, sort of coming out to be. The ones who are right now under discussions and who are going to go for a 2-year masters are only thinking education. So they are not in the mindset of thinking what will happen once they land, once they complete, because, that is still 2 years away. But in my opinion, the sentiment currently is not in the best direction. We were doing some survey among the families, and we spoke to some 350, 400 families who are part of the Collegify family. And we saw that 76% still wanted US to be their top destination. And close to 45% are applying to more than one country due to visa work concerns. 65% cited post-study work opportunity as a major decision factor. So these are some data points where we try to understand and evaluate, but we still see that the top US school becomes the dream, and trends have gone, right? So Trump came in before also. That time also the boat was shaky, but people sailed.
In the next few months, all eyes will be on Capitol Hill. Will Gosar's bill gain traction, or will it fade like past efforts to curtail OPT? Either way, students, universities, and companies are watching closely. Because when a visa acronym becomes a lifeline, politics becomes personal. This episode was produced by Vinay Joshi and sound designed by Rajas Naik. Executive producers Arijit Burman and Anirban Chaudhary. Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, do share it. You can find The Morning Brief on Amazon Prime Music, JioSaavn, Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. And of course, on ET's own audio platform, ET Play. Until next time, this is Neil Ghai signing off.